email out the link for this. Live stream, we're live. Live stream, we're live. YouTube, we're live. TikTok, let's go. Come on, come on, come on. And then let me email out on the special email list in case anybody wants to be a part of. And I will put up the Zoom link for you special people that are part of my inner groups if you want to join. So this always takes a little bit for me to do. And then I forgot to, oh man, I screwed up. I forgot to write this email that I send to the list. Okay, let's make this short. I'm live right now. This is on Pro Se Family Law for super high conflict. For all you night owls, or depending on where you are in the world. Okay. You know, last time when I did this, which was a little over a week ago, and I did 7 a little over a week ago, I wrote the email and forgot to send it out. So guys, bear with me. We're going to get into some fancy stuff. And if you're watching on YouTube, it's a little bit of a better quality. Dun, dun. Okay, okay. You know, there's so much on Pro Se Family Law that there's no way that we could get through it all tonight. And what's so crazy is, like, I have these men's groups, but there's so many women that have been watching the live streams. I'm like, geez, I do have to do something to facilitate this. And there's one last thing that I got to email out before we get into this. If you like what I say here, get all of my good stuff. And we're going to start in about 20 seconds. If I can find this. There we go. That's not what I'm looking for. Okay, it's a little longer than 20 seconds, guys. I'm sorry. The secret link for the people on my thing. We are live. Come on by. This is for the people who are on my paid groups. They get the Zoomatron link. Well, why not we do this? Why don't we do this? Let's get started on the fanciness of this all. You guys here on Zoom, you can watch my screen. Where are we? Where are we? Man, I am so happy. Like we've been on a call. It's 1:34 a.m. and I still have to do some stuff before I go to sleep. But I want to get this out, this video out, and keep giving content to the people that are following me or whatever, looking for help. And we were talking with some of the guys on this, and it's just so cool because the guys in my group, this is the best part about when you really work on yourselves, okay? You're coming in for pro se stuff, you're coming in for custody stuff, parental alienation, whatever your situation is. Anytime we have a problem in our life, man or woman, it goes deep. And when you go deep, you can find awesome stuff. And people that walk with you on that journey, it's cool. So I actually have 3 streams going on right now. There's my Zoom group, which I have you guys muted or the speakers are off, so I can't hear you. I may unmute you if you guys want to talk later once I'm done with the presentation. And then we got YouTube, and then we got TikTok. YouTube is going to stay online forever, this stream, so you get to hear my bumbling around for the first, 10 minutes or so. And then TikTok, I don't know how to save them on here and whatever, but welcome everybody. You can write in your questions. What's going to happen here is I'm going to go through a presentation that's on some pro se stuff, and then afterwards I'll answer probably a few questions, and it's usually like 2 or 3. And I don't know what to tell you. The questions do get buried, and I'm sorry if I do the live streams wrong, but one day I'll learn. How about we get started in this? All right. Okay. Pro se for family law is one of these things that everybody talks about, has an opinion about. They have opinion about lawyers, the business of family law, all of the horror stories that we have in it, but nobody really breaks down what we need to do if we're in high conflict custody battles, especially if we're men, but for you ladies watching this on TikTok or wherever you're watching it, this is for you too. But we don't talk about why we would go pro se or not. All right. We just say that we can. There's not a lot of guidance on it. There's some people telling you about it, and they're kind of like aggressively telling you about it, but it could get really dangerous. And the fact of the matter is within our groups, it happens. And within our groups, guys win in it. And you could actually talk and interact with those guys if you are a part of those groups. And if you can't afford that, we try and make information like this. And this is a big thing of what's so important to us. We have, in what I know, the only group that's existed for 17 years now, maybe 18, I think 18 in December, that has had men winning high conflict custody battles that have gone in with lawyers, without lawyers, had their kids kidnapped, gotten them back from other countries, the worst stuff, been to jail, gotten out of jail, the highest of conflict things. And a lot of times those guys go pro se. So what we want to talk about in this video is we want to talk about what does that mean? How do we distinguish if we have a type of case that could be done pro se? What happens if we have no options? How do we talk to the courts? How do we talk to judges? How do we understand the specific consequences? And a lot of the mentalities that get in the way of this, okay? This is going to be one video of many because there's a lot in this, and there's going to definitely be even more that we uncover as we do this more and more. All right, so let's get into this. So number one, this is not legal advice, and you need to understand that, okay? So anything that I'm telling you, you need to double check, you need to triple check, you need to own it. You need to understand that it could be different in your state and county. In fact, in one of the other outlines that we're going over for this week's live streams, we'll see if I get to it or not because it's kind of a complicated one, is understanding the whole general concept of family law and then getting what's detailed in your state and county. You have to do both equally, right? So everything's kind of dependent on these really particular things that are so unique and different, but there's also generalities that are always the same and they kind of flip against each other. And what you need to understand in this is that everything that makes a guy win, that I've seen win over and over again, is a guy that takes full responsibility of his case. So if you're a man or a woman watching this, you have to take full responsibility of your case, whether you have a lawyer or not. If you have a lawyer and the best lawyer in the world, you have to take full responsibility for your case. Okay, it doesn't mean people aren't accountable. That doesn't mean that you don't hold them accountable. But what it means is that there's a lot on the line. You're going to live it. Your family's going to live it. And if you screw it up, the things that you care about most get screwed up. So in this, where this information comes from and what I'm passing it on to you is from a group of guys who've won, in pro se, ultra high conflict custody battles. I don't know if it's going to work for you, but I'm going to tell you this. What I don't understand about so much of family law content is that you won't believe 10 guys who've won cases like yours or harder in the way that you want to do it, but you'll listen to somebody who's on Reddit who isn't really accountable for their information, or one person who's hysterical about whatever type of rights. Where this comes from is from guys that have won it consistently, and what I'm going to share with you on that. But your case could be different, and you need to understand that. All right. One of the things that you need to understand in this is the guys who go pro se in my groups are usually men who get destroyed in court. Okay. So they're men who have been hammered. They've been screwed over by attorneys. They've had bad rulings. They can no longer afford an attorney. They're facing false allegations, some form of toxic parenting, parental alienation, restraining orders, protective orders. And they need clarity, they need strength, they need support. And those are the guys in my group that end up going pro se. And these are the same guys that win. And I don't want to make it sound like all of them win. There's plenty of people that lose, but we have the highest density of men that have won. And those are all the commonalities within that. And so if you're going through that, I don't want to say that you need to jump right away to pro se, but you need to understand that there is a way to win, and it's long and it's hard. I'm going to do my best to explain it to you in this. So first off, what pro se actually means, a lot of stuff in the whole legal system is Latin based and all these different languages that we don't speak now, but we speak them in court. So it basically means it's going for yourself. It means you're self-representing. That's what it would technically mean in the English definition. I think in Latin, it's for you or for yourself. And what I want to make clear here is when we're going pro se, the safety net is gone. Okay. If you screw up, you don't get a cushion to fall on. Oftentimes, you don't get a second chance. Oftentimes, your reputation is not able to change. So pro se is not easier. Pro se is not automatically respected by any means. Pro se is not necessarily cheaper, so it definitely can be, but if you do it wrong, it can make things much more expensive. Judges don't actually, I want to say, like or dislike pro se litigants. And this is important to understand, right? So if you're going into court pro se, that doesn't mean your judge is going to favor you or be biased towards you. What we have to think is a judge does not like chaos. And pro se people often bring in chaos. They bring in disorder to the natural process of their courts. However, a judge can also respect a pro se litigant much more if they are organized and speak the language of the courts. Tons of videos on that. And if you're watching this on an edited version, I'll put up a playlist here for you to be able to watch those types of things, or you can look in the show notes and you can find a playlist on learning the process, learning the language of the courts. Very, very, very important. See, if you're pro se and you can do that, you have an opportunity to where a judge in the courtroom entirely can have more respect for you because you're actually doing it and you get some leeway. But oftentimes, family court is so confusing, it's so particular, it's so against the grain of what we would think justice is, that we oftentimes turn it into chaos. Or we don't think it's chaos. We think it's chaos, and we're reacting to chaos going, why are you saying this? I just want to be a dad, or I just want to be a mom, and you won't let me see my kids. And this is, going against my rights. This is going against, the 14th Amendment. This is going against all these different things. And man, we blow it. We turn the courtroom's chaos into our own chaos, and the judge doesn't like us anymore. So the other thing too that we need to understand with pro se is there's basically two paths. And for men in my groups, where the most successful, most useful pro se path is going to be the first one I talk about. But of the two paths, there's having a lawyer, and then for whatever reason, it stops working out, you run out of money, you either fire them or you work with that attorney on a limited capacity, and then you go pro se. Or you just start out from the beginning and say, man, F the business of family law. I'm going to do this all myself. And, we're going to take it all the way to the end. That second one is a lot more risky, because what makes things so important about family court is observing family court. And if we can observe family court, we can have our best understanding of things. And man, if you're just tuning into this, you're in luck, because I have to start it over because I screwed something up. And man, sorry about that. But it's going to be for the benefit of, only will it be the benefit for the greater good, we're going to cover this stuff even better. So let's rewind back. Sorry guys on the live stream. It's what happens when you have three windows at once. You forget the main window to turn the thing on. All right. Well, let's start it off again. So here we're going to be talking about pro se in family law, in super high conflict family law. What we want to talk about is, what does it mean to be pro se? What do we have to look out for? How do we determine if our case is good for this? And where this all actually comes from is from men who had super high conflict that were usually forced into pro se, representing themselves, running out of money, getting screwed over by lawyers, and then having that be their last option. And what's even better about that is this is really the story and information of men that won custody when they were starting out in ultra high conflict. And what I mean by ultra high conflict is that they had their kids kidnapped. Maybe they got kidnapped to another country, which is very, very difficult. And even a country that is not within The Hague, which makes it even more difficult. They could have had their kids taken away from them and parentally alienated for years. They had protective orders against them. They got their permanent protective orders terminated, which is almost unheard of. And a lot of these guys did a lot of their cases pro se. So they may have started out with attorneys, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but they ended up having to do it themselves in some of the most challenging things. And in one of the cases, the guy's attorneys who he worked with for years actually called him up afterwards and had him break down everything for him, because what he did they thought was legally impossible. They'd never seen it done before. And he also set precedent in his courtroom for parental alienation and all sorts of other interesting stuff that had never been done before. And he did that. He got that ruling by himself pro se. So this happens, and that's where this information is coming from. So we're going to try and get through all of this as much as possible. We'll see how well we do, but there'll probably be many, many different videos and tutorials and whatnot on pro se, because it's a huge thing asked about, and a lot of people are forced to do it. So really quick, this is not legal advice. What I'm saying here is just information, a history of what I've seen, and having the longest running men's group with the most amount of men who have won in high conflict custody and in pro se custody cases where they've won. They've gotten the custody that they wanted, or custody that was fair. And having seen all of that, we're taking that information for the people that can't afford the groups or be a part of the groups and that sort of thing. And you lost all your, who has the money for a custody case, so that you can have the information that will work for you. But it is your risk. Whether you have the best lawyer in the world or you're just watching some person on YouTube, this is your risk. These are your choices. I know how important that is. I know what the consequences of that are, but I do not know your case. I couldn't ever give you legal advice, not being a lawyer. All I can do is give you this information and what I've seen work and what we've seen work. And man, let me tell you, as a dad who has lost his kids, who's gotten them back, who's been on the worst side of the court and come back to get in some of the most dominant positions in custody cases, I can tell you that I do not want that to happen to you. And so you have to do your due diligence, double, triple check everything, all that sort of good stuff. Okay. It's really important. So it's not just a disclaimer. This is probably one of the best pieces of advice that I can give to anybody, is you have to be fully responsible for your custody case. Okay. So let's get into this. So what does pro se mean? Man, well, it means you're basically self-representing. You're going in without a lawyer. So you're entering into the court process, and you are going to be representing you. You're going to be arguing for yourself. Now, one of the things with having a lawyer is, they know the process, they know the law. There's all sorts of, back and forth, and especially family law attorneys, they could be so shady. There are great ones. I know many great ones. I've had amazing family law attorneys, but they're more expensive. If you're fighting for your rights for your child, you can easily piss them off. And just by you being you, a parent that can't see their child, and it's easy to have them give up on your case. It's easy with the amount of desperation, the amount of fight, the amount of hysteria that is included in family law, that it's very easy for somebody to rip you off. And even if a lawyer is good at doing their job, it's easy for them to say, you know what? This person's an asshole. I'm going to take their money and I'm going to walk them into a settlement, or whatever it is. I'm going to slack on this job. And these things happen all the time. Now, a lawyer, when you're entering into court, speaks on your behalf. Okay, so they are there to represent you. You are not actually representing yourself. And so when you're going in to be self-represented, you are fully representing yourself. But there's no safety net. There's no second chance. There's a lot of ways to make catastrophic mistakes that affect your family for the rest of your family's lives. Right? So it's real important to get this right. So I want to clear up a couple things. So pro se comes from the Latin word for yourself, but it's not easier. It's not something that gets respect immediately, and it's not necessarily cheaper. It's obviously cheaper because you're not paying attorneys for that. But if you make a mistake, what can happen a lot is you make a mistake so bad that it's impossible to repair. And you could still get hit with court fees. You could still get hit with different fines. You could end up in contempt in other ways. You could end up having to bail yourself out. You could end up getting a criminal record if you're in contempt in certain ways, or whatever it is. There are lots of ways where you could really screw up. And pro se doesn't just mean that you're representing yourself only in court. If there's an investigation where a lawyer might be better off representing you and you've decided to only go yourself, then you could really screw up an investigation, especially if it's a criminal investigation. So a lot of times what happens, especially for men, this is less for women, but it could still happen to women. But with men, man, especially in our groups, this happens all the time, is a false accusation comes to light, and it's immediately assumed that the man is violent or oversexed, or in some way he's a predator. And because of that, they're going to open a criminal investigation as well as a CPS investigation. They're two different ones. They could talk to each other, but they are two separate investigations. They both have to be dropped or dismissed or unfounded separately. Okay. So it becomes very, very complicated, and you definitely want some legal guidance if you are going in for any investigation with false allegations, any CPS, criminal, whatever. Now, sometimes you can't afford that, and then you have to do your best. But it's something that you really need your due diligence on. I would definitely check out there's another live stream that we have on finding a family law attorney. Look at that. It's a great option to understand the consequences of that, and how to look for one and interview them and the questions you ask and so on. And then there's also a playlist that is on the process of family law, which I would really, really check that out. Okay. So another thing that you want to understand about being pro se is if you're pro se, a judge doesn't automatically respect you, but a judge also doesn't automatically disrespect you. What you have to think is pro se litigants can get certain favors in the court, and they could get certain massive hindrances, massive biases. But the real thing that we see in our groups is actually is that pro se litigant stimulating chaos in the court, or are they stimulating what the court would like to call order? Now, to us, we don't see, if we're on that chaos side, we don't see that we're stirring up chaos. We see that the courts are chaotic. They're nuts. They're taking away our rights. All of a sudden, like, we don't get to be a parent. They're not listening to us. They're listening to her. They're believing lies. And we don't get a chance for due process or our rights, or, our constitutional rights, or the 14th Amendment. We don't get to be parents. And we think that's chaotic. We see them raising their voice, so we raise our voice. And at that point, you really screw yourself as a litigant. What the court wants, even though it's allowing chaos a lot, it wants you to follow its order. So a pro se litigant, if they don't know the order, the formalities, how to fill things out, how to file things, how to present evidence, how to address people, they start speaking out of turn, any of those different things, that judge is usually going to look down upon them. It's going to affect your ability to argue any sort of justice. It cuts you out massively. Now, a lawyer, hopefully, will do much better, but sometimes not. But you walking in blind without understanding the court, man, you can screw up. You will screw up in so many ways because it's just impossible to understand how it would work. However, a pro se litigant that understands that order a judge is usually relieved. They're they're encouraging towards it. I don't want to guarantee this, right? It could always go wrong, but it could really work in your favor in a lot of ways. And this is what we see with guys in our group. They start off with their judge making biased rulings against them. This was actually a big thing on our call earlier. They start off with, getting screwed over in some sort of case. This is kind of the norm for guys that enter our group. And they go in pro se or even with a lawyer, but in this case, we'll talk about pro se. And they start learning the process. And after a couple appearances, the judge starts seeing them doing the right things and it starts giving them more of a chance. And especially when you're dealing with somebody with a personality disorder, a huge thing in our cases, like a personality disorder can manipulate somebody at first glance and maybe for a long period of time. But the longer you have them go in a really set order where they're used to being a rebel, telling it like it is, being themselves, telling their sob story, or whatever crazy borderline narcissistic narrative that they have, they're going to fail and you're going to win. And that's usually where we flip these things. We hear about this all the time in the NPD stuff. And again, like I pointed to some videos that I have playlists of, but I'll put links towards all those down below. There's a lot on narcissistic personality disorder or toxic relationships, toxic traits that enter into the family court system. And that's one of the best things about our group is flipping those things to using it in our favor. So what we want to see is there's basically like two paths with pro se litigants. So in our groups, with the successes that we have, there are two types of guys that enter into pro se. And the first one is the one that usually does the best. Okay. But they're two different roads. The first is going to be a guy that starts out with an attorney, gets screwed over, parental alienation, false allegations. It gets too crazy, runs out of money, fighting, but goes to a couple court appearances with an attorney or multiple attorneys, because usually with things like false allegations or these types of anything with inflated domestic violence or false sex abuse claims or child abuse claims and things like that. Anything with that, oftentimes they hire the wrong attorney first, and that's where they screw up, and they might have a second attorney and they do a little bit better, but it's damage control. That guy ends up running out of money and has to go pro se. Okay. That's the guy that does the best. Okay. The second guy is the guy from the start that says, screw the system. I don't believe in any of it. I'm capable to do this. I want to go pro se. Here we go. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. And we do have guys that win in that, but there's usually that cowboy attitude, that I'm going to do it myself attitude. I'm going to talk about this a little bit later in the presentation, but I don't give up. I don't quit. I'm willing to do anything. I'm really successful in all these things, and I'm super smart. So I can do it. That guy usually has a huge growing pain before he achieves success. Okay. Now, I hope that doesn't happen. And I hope this video or the information that I put out there can prevent these things, because ideally it would be great if we could create a community where we could just go pro se, right? Where we just have the information there. So with all of this, one of the things that I'll say is that a judge doesn't hate pro se. A judge is going to hate chaos. The judge is going to hate confusion. The judge is going to hate disorganization. What a judge is going to reward is working within the order of their system. And so in order to do that, we need to understand their system. Fundamentally, if you're going in pro se and representing yourself, super, super important to follow that as your guide. All right. So let's get into this. Every man that has come to my group for 20 years, every man that has come to me in my coaching for 20 years, in my group for 17 years, will tell me that they will do anything for their kids, anything, and they'll swear and they'll mean it. And the fact of the matter is very few actually would do that. And the men that make it through this, the men that get wins, the men that make it past this and rebuild their lives, oftentimes have a very different story than just the grit of that. So what I want to talk about here is what actually works. So, what actually works when a man is forced into going pro se and it's the only option that he has? Okay. So, number one is it's brutal. Being a pro se litigant is going to be hard. It's not hard in a way that you've done anything else in your life. Okay. You're going to have losses. You're going to have losses that devastate you. You're going to have losses that are going to affect you and your child's relationship. They're going to affect possibly your reputation. And you have to be able to bounce back from that. You have to be able to deflate from your emotion and your anger, which every guy says he knows how to do, but probably does not. You put that in a men's group. You put that in therapy. You put that wherever you can put it, where it'll be safe and it won't come back to affect your case. In your courtroom, you get back to what you did wrong, what works, how do I make it better? There's always something that you can do better. This is what one of the guys who's one of the best, the most insane cases that we've had in our group. It's what he always says. There's always something you can do better. You can always find it. And let me tell you, in guiding this man for about a 4.5-year process, all the way to his win, it was a very crazy, complicated case, which he did. He did it. I didn't do it. But the container that I held for it, the times I picked up the phone for him, which oftentimes was a daily basis, was seeing him be crushed over and over again by the court system, him being alienated, him being screwed over, him being judged for something that ultimately was proven to be false, having the complete consequence of that legally, and his ex not having the same issues. Okay, which is just a horrible thing. When you go through court dates where you put everything online for that and lose, guess what? Guess what? You can always find something better. You can make the choice to quit, which I support you, because this is hard. If you need help walking away from this is hard. I get it. But if you want to keep going, I'll also support you. If you need help moving forward, I'll also support you. But the line of that is very different from the line of walking away. Pro se is hard. Do not ever think you are so smart and so accomplished that you can avoid the hard. Do not think that your pain in whatever it was, in managing major companies, dealing with high stress, going to war, watching whatever stuff, is anything similar to losing your kids and walking into family court. I don't want to compare them because all of those things are respected things that are points of pain for many, many men's lives, many women's lives. But this is different. It's a different pain. It's a different hard, and it takes a different side of you. Okay? So what you're going to need in this is you're going to need a support system. You're going to need a lot of time. You're going to need a lot of strategy, a lot of discipline. And if you don't have an open mind and you think you know it all, you are shooting yourself in the foot. Please, in helping the most amount of men in this who have won, that is so important. Do not overlook that. All right. So some proven essentials that come into this is, number one, you have to study actual family court. Okay. So you need to watch hearings. You can go in person. You can watch them online. I did a video the other day where I intercut a thing of where I went onto ChatGPT and typed in all the how you watch family court. You can find Zoom family court all over the United States. You can watch it 5 days a week. Okay. They don't make it easy. It's government sites, kind of sucks, but totally doable. And you can also go into your courthouse. It's better if you watch your judge. Okay, you need to learn your county's rules and procedures. You can't screw that up. So here's some of the things. And again, one of the videos that I'm planning to do in this next week is this idea of general concepts and really, really particular concepts. Okay, so what your court's procedures and rules are really specific. I don't know those. You have to find those. You have to work those. You have to study those. And then there's some general ideas about family court, which are really important. Kind of like if you're pro se, there's no safety net. Or if you're pro se, one moment. Or if you're pro se, that a judge is either going to like you or hate you. And what's that dependent on? Your ability to have order or chaos in the courtroom. Okay. The individual, the specifics are all those unique little things that are particular to your courtroom. You need to know those. Okay. Those are huge for you. Okay. So I think it's absolutely necessary to join a men's group that is focused on divorce and custody. And the reason for that is you can share documents, you can discuss things. They're going to understand your anger, your pissed offness. A lot of times, like a guy in my group said tonight on tonight's call that he shared this writing that I shared with everybody in the group to some of his friends, and they couldn't understand it or thought it was ridiculous or whatever. There's something about this process of family law that only can be understood by people going through this. And so if you're a woman, find a group of women that have that. If you can't find it, I think that's terrible. There's not enough of it. Start one. That's what I did. And sadly, 17 years later, after starting a group, there's really not too many more. And I'm sure they exist, but it sucks. It sucks. Church groups, friends, they tend to not work out as well. They just don't get the depression. They don't get what high conflict is. They get what normal divorce is, or being healthy and walking away. But heavy betrayal, parental alienation, you need a support system. Highly recommend, if you're going in pro se, that you get emotional support. So that could be therapy or some sort of mental health support. A lot of people have opinions on that. We integrate therapy within our groups and legal assistance, and we have lawyers in our groups. Okay, so in our groups, it's really important. So if you're forming your group, try and figure out, actually, I heard some ideas the other day of getting some expert witnesses to be a part of your groups. People who've done psych evals or CPS workers. I also have CPS and social workers that sometimes talk to my groups. These are great things to have in your group. Therapy, emotional support, please add it. Should just be there. It helps. Okay. You need to learn this cycle of winning and losing. So we go to court, we file, we take a loss, we go through the pain, we get back, we reorganize, we look at what we did wrong, and we go through the process again. Okay. And within that, we cut out our emotions. We put our emotions in the group, we put our emotions in the therapy, in court. It is all black and white, baby. Okay. So, as we said, every man swears he will do anything for his kids. When I start bringing up these checklists of things, he usually says, you know what? I want to do things the way that this guy that has the image of what a male winner looks like in court, and I'd rather do that instead. Sadly, of knowing so many men that have won, they don't look like the poster child for a lot of things in our culture, but they have done some of the most badass stuff a man can do. All right, let's go to this. Being right is not what's going to save you. What's going to save you is strategy. What's going to save you is you being able to calm down your emotions, think clearly, and move ahead. What is so crazy about men entering into family law, especially with wanting to go pro se and kind of being against the business of family law, is that they're obsessed about being right. They're obsessed about the Constitution. They're obsessed about their rights, and they know they can argue it. And one of the problems here is that in family court, it's terrible. Like I'm agreeing with you, it's terrible. Oftentimes the Constitution is thrown out. Your rights, as we know them, as we're told, are not represented. And this is a terrible thing. The problem is in order to change that, we have to go through a process of legislature and all this crazy stuff, which is extremely difficult. And that's not going to get your kids back. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But let's go over what doesn't work in pro se. So, in representing yourself, pro se for family law, what will not work and what you need to cut out is expecting that the courts are going to be fair, expecting that justice is going to work in the way that you're walking into it with. Now, justice in its own odd, crazy, chaotic way can work, but you have to work it in that way. Okay. Thinking your background, your resume, your pedigree, all of your accomplishments are going to somehow help you in this, they're not. Now, I know that doesn't sound like anything else that you've ever done. Like, so if you're going to learn a skill and go, man, I could learn jujitsu and become a black belt in 4 years because I'm athletic, I know how to take order, I'm a badass, I wrestled in high school and college or whatever it is, and I can do it. You probably don't have a chance with that. You probably don't. You know, if you're Gio Martinez or BJ Penn, you know, maybe do it faster, right? But in family law, if you've done the most amazing things in your life, you were a Navy SEAL and a U.S. Ranger, and David Goggins wishes he could be you. If you started 5 companies that equate more to anything Elon Musk is worth, and the president of the United States calls you every day for tips on whatever. You walk into a family law room with that mentality that you can know it and do it because you've done all those things and all those people respect you, it'll make you fail. You walk into a family law courtroom and you're going pro se, man, you are going to get your ass handed to you. And it's probably going to piss you off. It's probably going to make you really angry. You're going to act inappropriately. And your case is going to dig in a hole. If there's false accusations being made against you and you show that anger, you show that discontent, you're mega fucked. I don't know how else to put it. And this is one of the biggest problems for guys who are leaders, badasses, dudes who have carved their life out into something awesome. They walk into family court, and if there's any form of violence or abuse, any false claims of any kind, it's going to kill you because you're not going to understand it. You're going to get pissed off. It's going to be unjust, and you're going to blow up. And your reactions are going to make that protective order stick, and then you have no more case. Okay? So emotional outbursts, threats, ranting, mimicking her behavior. So if your ex is mouthing off and being loud in the courtroom, you can't do that. You have to act in the process. Okay? So in this, I want to mention this part. Okay? For pro se litigants that walk into family court, there's 4 things that they always guarantee me that almost never happen. Okay, so number 1 is they're willing to do anything for their kid. They're willing to do anything. And you're watching this going like, this asshole on YouTube is telling me that this is wrong. I'm just telling you what I've experienced and what I've seen over and over again. Okay? The number 2 thing is that they're going to start some sort of support group to help men get through this. The third thing is that they're going to do whatever the case, but then they're going to work their butts off to change the laws. And the reason why the laws aren't changed is because everybody was so stupid or incompetent, and they're basically not them, and they're going to lead the way through this. And the fourth thing is that they're going to dedicate their life to broadcasting information on this that's going to work to help guys, and it will be for free. And the reason why I say that these are the things that all men swear by, but very few accomplish, is because I've seen it probably thousands of times at this point. So you have to realize I've helped men in this for 20 years, over and over again. Somehow, I'm the only dude that I know with a group that is dedicated to this, that puts out a lot of free information for it, all this sort of stuff that is dedicated to men, that will take men through the whole stretch, man, beginning to end. You're at the point of a dysfunction. I'm going to take you through function. I'm going to take you to the end of the line. If you fail, I'm and you want to get back up, I am there. This is what I do over and over again. I don't see other people doing that. And even with a smaller, less demanding men's group, they exist. I know some are out there. I've heard of some. Apparently, there's a great one in Toronto, but man, doesn't happen. Of changing laws, as I said earlier on tonight's call, I can count on two fingers one person who I know who's gone on to change laws. Now, there could be more, but I get emails from a guy on a daily basis that says, you motherfucker, you say you stand up for men, you need to promote my petition for whatever. There are so many men, there's so many women out there with petitions, and I think that's great. I just want you to finish it, and I want you to change the law. And maybe you will, and I hope you do. But I see a lot of people not doing it. And then when I hear I'll do whatever for my kids, and I say, here's 10 guys with cases that were harder than yours, but have similarities, and they were in a deeper hole than you could ever be, and do what they say, and then those 10 men talk, and they tell him what to do. He says, no, man, I'm going to listen to this other guy. I'm going to listen to the dude who says he has experience in this, can't really show you proof of it, or maybe he does because it sounds and looks like the part of male toughness or whatever bullshit that is out there. And this is the reoccurring problem for men and women in all of our society. We have a bunch of false solutions sold to us, things that don't work. They work for a little bit. They have the veneer of functionality. They fit the image, but they don't have to be responsible for fixing your pain. And so what happens is you do it, works for a little bit, creates a new problem, and then all of a sudden you're back to square one. You're still dysfunctional. Nothing's fixed. And in many ways, things are worse. Over and over again. Like I try and show you as much proof as possible. I get more hate mail from men and men's rights groups and red pill dudes or whatever than I do from feminists or women or whatever. Like that's insane. And although that just sucks on a personal level, let's actually do the math on this. For years, I've been with men with, well, they've died on all the stuff that people say are men's issues and whatever. And none of those people were, or they may have done it once. I doubt it. But over and over again, I will take a guy all the way through. People need to be doing this. This is so hard. It is so painful. I don't care how strong you are. The toughest dude in the world that calls a man pussy, somebody who's lacking character, a bitch, whatever it is, calls a man weak for being broken in a high conflict custody battle. I would love to see them go through it. I'd love to see them go through false allegations. I'd love to see them be put in prison. I would love to see them be labeled as a sex offender and see how their skills would work for them. That type of mentality builds this bullshit of patterns of men thinking that will work for them. These false solutions. I just need to be strong. I'm going to do this. I'm going to be the person that's going to lead the way. I'm finally going to get to be a hero because I have pain or whatever. Great. I fucking want you to be a hero. But first, win your fucking case. And if you're going in pro se, that cowboy shit needs to get cut the fuck out. I know that you might need it to start there and move forward, to have the confidence to wake up in the morning. You know, it's kind of like your coffee, but your coffee isn't your God. You need to drop that, get to the black and white, get to the stuff that works. All right. Other things that fail in pro se family court, it's going to be dependence on free resources. Now, this really sucks. But a lot of people, the first thing they do when they look at pro se family law is they look at pro bono attorneys. Okay, if you can find one, great. But man, good luck with that. Don't hold your breath on that one. Very hard to find. Family court workshops, family court donations by different legal teams, informations. The other things too is YouTube blogs and videos, and doing a lot of the research for this. You saw a lot of pro se information on how to do pro se that was written by attorneys, that was written for oversimplified cases. If you're in high conflict, you are not going to be able to translate kind of a normal divorce custody case that doesn't have false allegations or parental alienation or BPD or NPD behind it. You're not going to be able to take that template and have it work for you. In fact, it'll work against you. So false allegations, protective orders, things like that, they take a very special type of family law knowledge and best practices and procedure. So it's a huge thing to really understand. So look, man, I'll tell you this. If you're in a high conflict court, there's NPD, there's BPD, there's false allegations, there's alienation. 90% of free legal advice does not apply to you. 90% of the stuff you're going to read online, 90% of the stuff you're going to study will not work. You need to look particularly for those things. Now, I have playlists of those, and there are some other people who have YouTube channels. And again, like these people who are making content about this that are legitimate, it's great. I don't see them as competition. There needs to be more of it, more good information, not bad misinformation. But you need to look at, okay, what about false allegations? What about a protective order? What do I need to do to get that dismissed? That's what you need to look at. And so many people, instead of looking at what they need to, right? So how do I get a protective order dismissed? They look for, how do I do pro se? Oh, and I have a protective order. And they read about how to do pro se in this kind of simple, non-high conflict custody or divorce situation, and you absolutely screw yourself. And when you screw yourself in this, what did I say at the beginning? Man, you screw your entire family. This is all on you. Okay? All right. So let's talk about some things of arguing law in the courtroom. And again, as I go over this, this is not legal advice. I cannot give you legal advice. I'm not a lawyer and I'm not your lawyer. But when you go into the courtroom, so many pro se litigants will argue their case on how they feel the law should work rather than what the law is and how that law is regularly argued in their courtroom. Those things are super important. So we don't want to argue how we feel the law is, how we interpret what it says in black and white in the statutes. We want to argue what that law is and how that law is normally argued in that courtroom. Now, if there's a gray area, like parental alienation, oftentimes a gray area. The reason why is there's no definition psychologically for parental alienation, at least that is entered into most courtrooms. So you have to find the gray area in it. How do we make that argument? How do we get an argument first that makes sense so that it can show that like we are being kept from our kids and this is psychologically damaging for them? Maybe we need psych evals, all these different things. So we need to understand that. So this is a mistake that every man makes. We go, okay, I'm going to represent pro se, or maybe we even have an attorney, but we go and look up the statutes. We see that statute, and then we go, man, she's doing this, this, and that. I'm going to win. I understand the best interest of it's clearly I'm in the best interest of the child. You know, this is actually a common mistake that perhaps your ex is making about you. She's saying, well, the kids like me more than him. They're happier with me, so that's in the best interest of the child. That's not how you have that argument. That's not how that statute is interpreted, okay? So the right way that we need to understand the law is we need to first understand what the statute says, okay? Then we need to learn how your judge is going to hear that. And then we need to see what actually wins. We need to see how that court, that judge has ruled on that before, okay? So here's an example just to make this work a little bit easier, all right? So Let's say the statute says, and most statutes will say something along these lines, will say custody must reflect the best interest of the child. Okay, most men argue, I'm a good dad. She lied about this, and she's a narcissist, and I'm good. Here's how I'm good. Here's my case. I ran it over with my brother and sister and mom and whoever else, right? And that's the thing. But what a guy who learns how to properly articulate law and is going in pro se, he would say, in Smith versus Jones, Judge Perez ruled maintaining continuity of contact, stable routines, and cooperation was the best interest standard. And I'm requesting the enforcement of XYZ order based on those same grounds. So they're citing the statute in another case that did a similar thing that's happening in my case. Okay, so if you're doing this yourself, every argument that you have needs to have that. So, best interest of the child, okay? In these cases where I'm a dad that works as a firefighter and I have an odd schedule, how am I going to cite how this is solved in other cases? How am I going to cite that the best interest of the child is going to fit within that? Every single argument that you have needs to have a statute. It should have evidence too. There should be some sort of narrative in that. And you should be able to cite how the judge or how the courts have ruled on that before. Now, when we get into the cases where pro se guys in my group have set precedent, meaning they're the first time a judge rules on this in their county or state or whatever. And so then other judges can reference that case. So they set precedent in their courtroom on things like in one of our cases, parental alienation was never said in that courtroom before, never acknowledged. And now it was in one of our cases where the guy went pro se. You have to be really creative. What he had to do, and actually one of the things he did, helping change laws here, is he had to show that it was psychologically damaging. He had to show that he was attempting to work with the mother over and over again. He had to show that the mother showed a pattern. That pattern had to be proven in the psych evals that were like, this took years actually to put it all together. And then he could show in the way that the court would hear it that this is causing psychological damage, and we're going to call that parental alienation. That's kind of amazing. Now, everybody who hears this, again, when we go back to those pro se litigants or even guys who are coming in with attorneys and so on, and they say, it's not going to take years for me. I'm smarter. I'm better. I've done this. No. Talk to the guys that have won. Talk to the guys that have won. Do everything that they've said. Learn everything that you can from them, and then see how that fits in your case. See how that fits in for you. See how that fits in with your personality type. See how that fits in with probably some of the great qualities that you have that are going to help you win, but your ego has to get out of the way. You have to look at people that have won this before, or else you're going to speak the wrong language and you're going to screw it up. And the thing is guys get so in their head about this that they go, man, but I have to win. I have to win. This person sounds like they're saying something wrong. This person sounds like the loser mentality. This person sounds like somebody that is part of the lying system that's there to cheat me. Cut off. I'm going to do it my way. I'm going to listen to the dude on Reddit that brags about stuff that, we don't know if they really exist or not, or whatever the situation is. And again, I'm sure these guys have existed. I'm just saying that I know a lot of men who have won super high conflict going pro se in trials, cross-examining their exes, cross-examining people that totally betrayed them in the hugest ways, pastors, leaders, people that turned their backs on them, and were able to win with that kind of pressure. They did not follow the super cowboy method. All right. So a couple things here is when you have vague laws, when you have laws that are undefined. So for instance, common one here, you're a cop, you're a firefighter, you're an EMT, you're a first responder, you're going to have a different schedule than other people. Another one might be parental alienation. You're being parentally alienated, but it's not on the books. How do we start to learn to set up our case for this? If you're a cop or a firefighter, you have an odd schedule like that that's consistent, you need to find other cases with people with jobs like yours. And oftentimes that may not be in your county, right? These super high conflict cases where there's a lot going on. All right. It's easy to make the argument that you can't have 50-50, right? Because the schedule's all screwed up. But you can. And so then you'll have to look for cases outside of your county, and you can bring those in. Obviously it's a different thing, but if a judge has a gray area and you find a solution for that judge through precedent from another county, even another state, it could work if you present it in the right way. And this has worked. This has worked, I think. So Texas has new laws that have come out that are just excellent. And I forget the state, but one of our clients made the argument in another state of what Texas was doing. And this is very important to do. So with these more ambiguous things you're trying to fight for, you really, really need to do your due diligence on it. You need to find out how I can present that to a judge. This is huge. And I get it. Probably, 30 minutes ago, you were like, this is too complicated, Steve. This is too much. But that's why we have all these awesome groups and people and communities to work with it. So let's go over this. So a step-by-step pro se map for somebody who's in a high conflict custody case. Okay, so number one is you need to start understanding, okay, what is going on in here? Are there protective orders? Are there false accusations? What am I dealing with? So seriously, if you're entering into a custody battle and you're deciding to go pro se, you need to start looking at what is in front of you. Does she have NPD? Does she have BPD? Is there false sexual abuse allegations? Are there false allegations towards my kids? What is going on in domestic violence? What is she willing to do, lie about? What's on the line here? Why is this high conflict? Okay, and remember, if something's high conflict, 90% of the advice, especially for pro se, is not going to work for you. But 90% of the advice on what to do when you're facing, divorce or custody, it's going to be different for you. If you walk into a temporary protective order hearing and you do not have a game plan for that, it's very likely to suffer that massive tragedy. And I don't want you to suffer that, okay? So you have to look at what this is. You have to look at what has been filed. So if you've been served, there's a file for you. You need to go down to the county clerk's office. You need to get your case file. You need to see where you're at. And the reason for that is that's exactly where you're starting. That's where you're arguing. That is what you're arguing. That's what's going to go in front of the judge. That's going to have whatever motions for you to show up and why you're going to be in front of court. And what you're going to argue that day in court is only going to be that. If she lied, if she cheated, if whatever the issue is, or the many issues that come into a divorce and a custody battle, all that's going to be argued that day is in that motion. Now, if the judge decides to introduce more that gets brought up by her or even by you, that's great. But you have to thoroughly and completely defend, argue whatever is happening that day. All right? So evidence. You need to learn how to organize evidence. Now, I feel terrible about this because somebody commented on one of my videos the other day about how I didn't go over the evidence part. I'm like, oh man, this was 5 years ago that I made this video or whatever it was. And now we have tons of videos on that. I wish they would have seen that. Evidence needs to be put in a timeline. You need to save it in a way which is easily shareable. You need to understand what the court wants in your evidence. So you need to share with the county clerk or the court or submit to the courts evidence in the way that they want to see it. Bottom line, that's going to be different for your state. That's going to be different for your county. So that's one of the things that's very specific. There, a lot of times on your county clerk's website or in their office, they're going to have the requirements for what they need in evidence. But then you should go down and watch family court so that you can see how different evidence is filed. This is huge. Like I talk to guys all day long about how they went into court, got screwed, and they had tons of evidence, and the judge didn't care. Now, there's a couple of reasons why the judge may not care. The judge may not care because the judge is a bad person. That's what everybody says. And that could be true. There are judges that suck, but the judge probably, most likely didn't care because you filed it wrong, you didn't present it right, it was out of order, you were arguing the wrong thing at the wrong time, you were speaking out of turn. These are things you can fix. And the way you fix them is not by being too smart and learning about something with remedial online knowledge. The way you learn it is you go to your county clerk's website, you go to your county clerk's office, you ask them, how do you file this? If they say we can't give you legal advice, ask them for information from a paralegal or a lawyer who could help you with this. If you can't do that, you start calling lawyers and you ask for a consultation to learn how to properly file something. You work with ChatGPT. You can join a group like mine or somebody else's and ask people there how to do it. And they'll go over it with you to the best of their knowledge. And then it defaults to what does it exactly need to be for your state and county. Do not screw this up. In evidence, always follow a timeline, dates, do not cut video, keep the whole thing there. You can make hold on one second. You do not cut any video. You can say it's in between minutes 16:04 and 16:19, and you can make a cut within that, but you have to share the whole clip. All right. If you are not using something like Our Family Wizard or Talking Parents, use an app like that because it's immediately transferable to judges. They understand it. If you just take screenshots, those things can be faked. There's all sorts of stuff to how you get it right. Discovery. This is a huge process that you need to go through. You need to understand it. You need to understand what could be asked. And you also need to understand what is discovery. What is an interrogatory? What are the differences? Okay. What is arbitration? How could that be useful? What's the difference between that and mediation, which there's a huge difference. What are you going to do to educate yourself in these? There's so many ways. And again, start with the general idea and concepts of these, which is very, very important. Don't skip it. It'll give you a good bird's eye overview. But you could go to ChatGPT. You could Google things. You could talk to different attorneys. You could talk to a general practice, a general attorney that is in practice for something else. But you also then want to test that. You have to do both of these things in how your county, how your courtroom, how your judge sees this, how they want it. Okay. Very, 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 very important. Okay. You need to understand the differences between hearings and trials. You need to understand the difference between mediation and arbitration. As I said, you need to understand these different components of the court process. So you also need to understand in a hearing, how do you address the court? How do you bring something up? How do you submit it? Okay, how do you make an argument? How do you make an objection? These are all things that are super, super important. Why in an objection you might need to cite a law, case law. You need to understand what that is. In family court, watching it is huge. If you're going in pro se, you've got to watch family court. Everybody's got to watch family court. You're going to learn so much from it, but it is massive. Okay, you need to understand what happens post-judgment or modifications. So what happens if something's wrong? How do you file contempt? How do you file enforcement? How do you file a motion to modify? These are all things that are super important because remember, as I said, pro se, there's no safety net. You don't get a second chance. Well, you kind of do. It's just the consequences are that much harder. But your second chances are going to come post-judgment. How do you file a modification? How do you schedule orders? What do we do after we get our orders and there's something wrong? There's something that needs to be changed. Something doesn't work. Before we enter into any sort of judgment or ruling, we should understand what the appeals process for this is. This is huge. This came from our group like pretty recently. Somebody had been alienated from their kids for 10 years and fighting for their relationship back. And one of the things that he said, one of the things I wish I would have learned, and I do now all the time, is I make sure that I understand the appeals process before I ever set foot in a courtroom because stuff can go wrong all the time. Okay. So, what is courtroom conduct? How do we address people? How do we look good? How do we sound good? How do we package everything in the right way? Okay. These are all very, very important things that a lot of people bypass in it. And so that's always a good checklist to all of this. Now, in being a pro se litigant, probably the most important thing that you need to understand, especially if you have no experience in this, is you're going to need to understand the courtroom process. And the courtroom process is something that if you fail at it, you basically have no case. And so in this, I've made this playlist to help you find out what is going to be the best aspects of learning that process. In any case, guys, I'm going to end the live stream here, or I'm going to continue it and answer questions. And this light went out. But if you have any questions, I'm going to look on YouTube and on TikTok and answer them now in the happiest way. Thank you so much for watching all of that. To start it over. Man, I hate it when problems like this happen because they make the editing process so much harder. I have all these lights that plug in, but this light is battery powered. I knew it. I knew it. This would happen. Mine is literally like Jerry Springer. Man, I hear you. Okay, so we are all entitled to 50-50. It's wild, but you need to appeal proper persona and persona. Man, you guys are hardcore here. Oregon has a resource to help file paperwork. Man, so this is interesting. So Oregon is a tough state. And man, like where Oregon is a tough state is that if you get a ruling against you, especially like as a guy, so any ruling that is false or whatever, that's not good. Okay. So there's a question here. Let's see what it actually says. Okay, so man, it's so late. I'm too tired. Let me go to all my pages here. Stand up, Dad. I'm gonna get to you. I'm gonna get to you. Man, some of these. Okay. All right. So this is interesting. We have a question here, or a comment actually, about Oregon, and Oregon with the many different resources that they have for you if you're going through custody battles. And this is interesting because in our groups, we have some of the worst rulings against men coming from Oregon, and where it moves into false allegations that move into criminal. And it's just a state where it was very easy, at least in these few cases, on where it just blew up and got out of hand. False allegations can go really bad for a guy there. And there's a lot of ways where a woman can just take it and run with it. And again, this is not all women, but this happens, right? And yet at the same time, Oregon, we've had some of the most impressive wins, just crazy, where men have dominated. And even when, and while going pro se, even when their initial attorneys were like, you can't win with this, or I'm not going to take your case, or it seems like maybe, this is too risky with abuse or whatever. And so it's kind of a tricky state. Like there are some laws that make it very easy for false allegations to get out of hand and go criminal. And that's a horrible experience. Ending up with a prison sentence or trying to avoid a prison sentence with a plea due to criminal charges is a horrible situation to be in. I've been in that situation, right? Yet at the same time, if a man can work within the right system, even with tough judges that have a bad reputation towards men, man, they have done all right. And I don't want to make that a guarantee for you, but one of the things that the guys that do win in Oregon, what they say is that the resources are amazing. So they get a lot of resources, not just with certain types of legal help, legal aid, these types of things, but even with parenting afterwards, supplementation for their kids. Like one guy put together a whole package for it, which is pretty cool. And man, that is some good stuff. So this is one of the things that I could say. With the 5 or 6 or so cases that we've had with guys in Oregon, there is that wide swing. In states like California or Washington or Texas, Florida, Colorado, New York, New Jersey, there's actually quite a few. There's a lot more information, Illinois, on what we've seen happen. And it does depend county to county, state to state, but Oregon is always one of those unique ones where it's like, wow, man, that happened. So I don't know if that's helpful for you, but man, there's a lot of cool stuff that happens there and also some not so cool stuff. Okay. Man, there's a lot of stuff on here that I'm reading of so I'm trying to say this with as much respect as possible in just to help educate on this, is that a lot of us, and we walked in the same way. Okay, so let me formulate this in a something that could be useful for the YouTubes. So in doing this live stream, there's a lot of questions, and there always kind of is basic questions that men have of like, I walked in with evidence, it was unfair. What happens when I'm dealing with a narcissist? These things don't work. I tried, I did everything you said, and it didn't work. And here's the thing. I'm really hands-on with people that I work with. People that I work with the whole way, man, the whole way, from start all the way to finish and then beyond. And one of the things that I know from that is that more than likely you didn't do everything I said. More than likely there's something missing in there. And whenever I make a mistake or any of my clients make a mistake, we're pissed off. It's unfair, saying a lot of the same things that you're saying, but then it defaults to, okay, what could I do better? What could have been done better? Were there any mistakes and can I find them? And this is fundamentally important. So many of the questions that I am getting are basics to family law where you're already in the wrong direction. If somebody's a narcissist, it doesn't matter. That sucks for you. The betrayal is really bad. But unless you can show, and I get how bad it is, unless you can show through a psychological evaluation or a previous diagnosis that they have NPD or BPD or whatever, then it doesn't matter. There's no crime against being a narcissist. There's no crime against being an asshole. There's nothing in our entire legal system about these things. The argument for this would be that they have NPD, and now that's diagnosed, because a judge cannot diagnose. No matter how much you can convince them, it does not matter. They cannot make that diagnosis. But if you can show them a diagnosis, and then you can show that in some way that diagnosis harms a child, then you have an argument. But you have to have that diagnosis first. Instead, all that harm could be argued. So I'll give you an example really quick. And there's more questions in here that were kind of a few basics that, guys, you need to educate yourself. Please get my 30 and 30. Please get my free stuff. There's so much of it. All right. Here's an example. She lies to the child about you. She tells you that the child says that they wish you would kill yourself. This is true for many, many dads, or something like this, right? Keeps you from seeing the child. Tells lies to friends and family about you. Okay. Those all could be argued. It's totally fucked up, right? This is totally screwed up. Like, you could say, well, did you say this to the child or not? Here's the text message proof, whatever. She said it to the child. And then she says, well, look, we were in a heated thing and whatever. They give some excuse where it's not that bad. She's having a bad day, whatever it is. All right. And then she keeps the child from you. She does some sort of gatekeeping thing, whatever. And you go to the court and you show that, and then, well, let me argue this in this way. And this happens throughout all the different claims being made. There's almost always an argument for it. And this is what you have to think. How is this going to be argued in court? If you get the diagnosis, they can say this is a trait of BPD that's untreated. And it's proven through these exact things, the gatekeeping, the lying, the, telling a child, lies about the father. This is NPD, and she has it because we have a legitimate diagnosis. And now I'm showing you how that's going to affect a child because there's information and studies that the court cares about on NPD and long-term whatever abuse to kids. And here's how they end up. And there's tons of information. And that's the argument. That's how you have to make the argument. But there's all these things that consistently get written in by men. And I'm like, men, I produce so much stuff for you. Just get it. Put your email address in my 30 and 30 high conflict portal. You're going to get so much information on this for free. And if you can't do that, if you cannot give your email, that's too much to ask. I understand. Go watch the playlists on YouTube that break this stuff down for you. But here's the thing within this, like you have to have people around you. You have to check your head on this. Start your own group. I get it that everybody says that they're going to do that and then they don't. But somehow I did. You can. So there's all these ways where men, women, whoever are sabotaging themselves. And if you learn it, it is key, man. Man, guys from New Zealand in here. Man, New Zealand is tough. New Zealand and Australia, man. New Zealand, Australia, Canada, they're rough, man. A lot of guys from there who come to our groups, and it is hard. Yeah, we make calls specifically for Australia just because some of the most brutal stories and some of the best wins are from Australia. It's crazy. But like, man, it's rough. There's even stuff with Argentina. It's like, Jesus, man. It's crazy. Okay. Let's check out here on YouTube. Are you familiar with the 4D and the 1994 VAWA built by feminists? I'm familiar with the title 4D. Good tip for pro se. Step 1, check the local court. Review what your specific judge's rules are. Each judge is different. Know your judge's rules will be super helpful. Title 4D about the child, support enforcement, economic focus. The VAWA 1994 about domestic and sexual violence, criminal civil protections. Man, well, thank you there. Dudes, dudettes, thank you so much. I'm going to do a live stream tomorrow as well, late at night. Hopefully you stick around for it. Let me see if there's any new questions on TikTok. Hey, going over the 30 and 30 class. Cool. Steve, long time. Need to join your calls again. Man, you do. Busy trying to reset my life. Okay, my son's mom is treated with assault charges. My son. Man, you know what? Can you subpoena counseling records to see diagnosis? Yes, you can. They can also argue it. Okay, this is actually a really good question. Okay, so how do we get medical records in a high conflict custody battle if we don't have access to them? Can they be subpoenaed? How do we request them? Can we get them in discovery? Now, here's the thing. So you can subpoena anything, right? But if you're with an attorney, that could get expensive, right? So technically, if you subpoena something, they have to review it and read it. So it could be a long document, and that costs money. If you're going in pro se, then yes, you can subpoena it. But here's the trick, all right? So this happens a lot with medical evidence. And you can subpoena it, and then they can say, look, for the protection of my client, I have to protect this. I'm going to deny it. So then you have to go to a judge and you make your argument to the judge. Now, in that process, it's not like it's some long-winded thing, but you do have to get a judge's signature on it to force the subpoena. And this is usually how it goes. So you need to understand that, because if they have a lawyer and their lawyer's good, you can predict that they're going to block the subpoena. They're going to try and say, like, look, we can't do it. You know, the doctor, the counselor, the therapist is not going to want to be compliant. And plus, a doctor, nobody likes going to court, right? But that's what you would have to do. And if you can get a diagnosis, just make sure, like, especially if you're going for a diagnosis of some sort of mental illness that'll prevent you from having to do a psychological evaluation. Here's the hole in that. How would they argue it? What's this diagnosis from? Did they get any treatment on it? If they got any treatment on it, so you could be crazy and have custody. It's that when you're crazy, diagnosable crazy, and it's untreated and they're refusing treatment, which is really common, right? And that's when you could lose custody. And it's not just that. It's more complicated. It's that there's some issue, they're untreated for it, and it's affecting the child. Now, here's another thing that also comes up on our calls. They're borderline and they're abusing us. They're narcissistic, they're abusing us. That doesn't matter. Your relationship is over. It's not that big of a deal. You know, they could say you're abusing them, but then this moves into he's a man, he could be violent. You know, if a woman's abusing a man, it's not a big deal. Like all this horrible stuff, right? I totally disagree with it, right? So her claims are going to be taken seriously of abusing her, and they're going to put a protective order against you. But if she has NPD or something and she's abusing you in some way, it's probably not going to be recognized. So if you're trying to get the psychological evaluation subpoenaed, like court ordered, if you're trying to get that ordered, you need to show that it's to protect the child, that child could be in danger, and the psychological evaluation would help determine that. That's really, really important to get. If you make the argument that you've been abused, man. So you have to hit a home run, if we can call it that, on showing that there's potential for some sort of psychological malady that we need a psych eval for, so we can protect a child. There's danger. The other thing you need to know is the psychological evaluation is going to be better than a previous diagnosis, because a previous diagnosis, if it's too old and there was some form of treatment or whatever, it's like, well, okay, that happened and now it no longer exists. Whether that is true or not, that is an argument. So a psych eval is harder for them to argue. And the other trick to a psych eval is that if you get it at the beginning, they're not afraid of it. And their attorney probably hasn't realized that they may have a problem yet. So that's an important one. If you get it towards the tail end, it's like, why would I get this? I don't want to do what the court tells me. You know, they're going to be their mentality. But at first, this is going to screw him more. Let's do it. I'm going to win. This is going to help me. He has to take one too. Or cost some money. F him. And they go in with their full ego, and that's what gets them. So if you can do that early on, and there is some sort of issue, it's kind of the best time to do it. Otherwise, more than likely, you're going to have to get it court ordered, which is harder. You got to show it's for the protection of the child. All right. There was one question that I think I got emailed that I was so interested by this. And I'm going to try and keep it anonymous while I read it. So it says, question: what if you've done some dumb things that your ex is trying to justify an estrangement from the kid's rejection, but their influence is controlling you, using the kids by trying to capitalize on mistakes? Okay. Like, I used to spank my kids. That's one of them that was written in. Move somewhere with my kids. Okay. Okay. I lost my kids originally. Okay. Broke. Okay. Man. Okay. So this is kind of complicated, and I don't want to give this guy's identity away because this is an email. But this is a good question. So let's go through this. I have a company that helps men defend false allegations in custody battles, narcissistic abuse, and so on. But what happens if the man is also doing some things that are not good? And these could be things that may have been abusive. If maybe he's a narcissist, or maybe he's got addiction issues, or an alcoholic, or maybe there's both of these things going on. Both parties are flawed. And what I want to tell you here is what's so important about this is in most cases, that's the truth. Okay. In most cases, when we really look at it, there's always a little dirt with everybody, or a lot. And so what we have to realize is the moment we think we can give up and have the courts decide our fates, which can be very, very hard for people, especially who have issues like, let's say you do have a personality disorder, or you do struggle with addiction, or these types of things, the courts could be really hard on you. And we want to stop that. So we want to, one, stop the courts from interfering, two, have as much safety as possible, and three, recover and become a good person. Now, this is interesting because in running a men's group for 17 years now, I can tell you that advice for men, when I tell people about this, they say, oh, that's great. You empower men. Oh, men need that. They need to open up. They need to open up and feel how we want them to feel, how we think is safe, because men are bad and don't open up and don't, whatever, all this sort of stuff. And the reality of my men's group that only handles really hard problems with men is that that's not what happens. That can happen. Men do open up, men do feel, but it doesn't look as pretty as we all want it to look. It also doesn't look like the shiny guy that's buff and is on steroids and has like perfect teeth and all these things, right? Male healing is very unique. In the moment we try and enforce it, just like if we were trying to enforce female healing, we put it in a horrible place. So what I always tell people, which they can't seem to understand, is what if somebody has done something wrong and they want to get better? Is truly the only answer that we discard and throw them away, which usually say, oh man, that's a little bit too much. But let's look at the reality of it. What is their answer? So let's say if a man is abusive, they say, you have a group that helps men be abusive, that helps men lie, that helps men cheat. You're telling me? And it's like, man, wow. So if a man comes to me for whatever reason and wants help, like I still work with drug addicts, but I worked relentlessly with drug addicts for many, many years. There are some serious problems there, real problems. They've done some bad things. They've done really bad things. And they want to get better. Okay. If you don't want to throw them away, where do they go? So do they go to a therapist, a counselor? A lot of times those people don't see them, because that's why these men were coming to me, because they went in these other venues and they didn't get what they needed. And so they had to come to a coach or a mentor. They had to come to me to work with them. I didn't necessarily say I wanted to work with them. I didn't even say I was qualified to work with them. I just said my door was open and I'll help you. And what was interesting in that is these guys didn't have anywhere to go. Like working with guys who are in prison, they're incarcerated. I take calls from them. And if I have the opportunity to visit them, I'll get whatever permissions and try and do so. And everybody will tell me, well, get them a therapist or get them a psychologist, get them the pros. I do this. I actually do this. I get therapists to work with those guys that could really help them, because it would really help them. And a lot of times those therapists quit, those social workers quit. They don't want to do it, even if they're getting paid. They're getting paid, funded through my group that is volunteering that money for guys who can't afford it. That's interesting. So when we say don't throw them away or let the pros handle it, where are they? So when it comes down to this idea of, let's say, guys in my group for divorce and custody, let's say it's not that bad. Let's say they got in an argument and they got angry and they shouted and they told their wife to fuck off. And they swore at him. Now, in the meantime, the woman is hitting them or whatever. They're in a marital dispute. And I'm not saying any of it's right, but in that, it could be really easy to do some things that would be considered violent, dangerous by law enforcement, by the courts for a man. Okay. Now, I'm not trying to say that it's good to make people afraid or afraid for their life or hurt, but this can happen and it doesn't result in danger, but it's immediately seen as so dangerous that it moves into that throwaway category. Or you need to be careful about how you help them. Or if you help them, you're supporting them. That is one of the most toxic things in our culture. And if you cannot see how that is causing major, major problems for men and the future generation to come, well, in future videos, I am definitely going to point that out a lot. It's horrible. It's a horrible phenomenon. Every single guy that has come to my group for many, many years has that problem in whatever it is. Whether that's PTSD, sex, divorce, custody, suicidal thinking, previous abuse, everything's diminished, it's underwritten, and it's seen as before we get to the healing process of that, let's make sure that it's not toxic masculinity before I will ever take you seriously and hear your story. So when we have a custody situation, if you think for a second that you need to lose because you've done something wrong or there's already a judgment against you, no. It's taken me a little bit to get to this point here. A lot of people have done things wrong. Each thing in court is argued individually. My attorney, who passed away, rest in peace, he told me, Steve, I've gotten a guy custody who was found guilty of murder. Now, I don't know what that whole situation was, but the murder is separate from the custody. And I assume he had already done his time or whatever. And I can also assume that the mother was probably pretty bad. But the thing with that is each thing is separate. Now, if this was within your custody case, it will affect it. Okay, so if you broke some decision making, if you broke an order, if you're in violation of these things, they were there, but that doesn't mean that you can't argue it back. This is one of the things that, and I don't think that this gentleman who wrote this in, and I'm trying to keep you as anonymous as possible, but like this sort of thing, we don't realize how much the court would love to rule on in favor of you. Maybe not in the most stellar favor of you, but if you're a man that is done wrong and you do the court's process, the court would love to give you some rights because it'll make it feel good about itself. It'll make the judge feel good about itself. I see this with addicts all the time. Addicts with custody problems. Addicts, and this is probably the thing I should have talked about first here. In working with addicts for so many years, I saw moms and dads lose custody of their kids legitimately through drug use around their kids, driving while intoxicated with their kids, like having drugs around their kids, overdosing, and their kids, being found while they were purple and whatever. Horrible things. These are horrible things. And I watched before I ever started with hyper focusing on custody stuff, right? So I always had divorced dads or dads going through high conflict custody battles where I helped them personally with this. What I saw first were the addicts that really lost custody for real reasons. And they went to go work their asses to get custody back. And it would take them 2 years, maybe 3, to be able to get those parental rights back. Now, these addicts were in some form of recovery, whether that was 12-step, SMART, something that was really structured. So there's alternatives, forms of recovery. The court's not going to give a shit about that. So the court's going to give a shit about what it gives a shit about. It's not going to give a shit about what may work or not. It's going to give a shit about what has precedent of what has worked before, which is going to be something like 12-step recovery, SMART recovery. It's probably a couple others, okay? Some sort of IOP class. And those guys, those women would be able to get their kids back. Maybe not full. Maybe they did get full, but they had to go through the court process first. In the court, like sometimes I'd go to these cases, it's support. like their recovery buddy support. And I'd watch. And it would make the judge happy to award custody. Mr. XYZ, you should be really proud of yourself. You've done a good job. Hope you can be a good dad. Something like that. And the judge didn't care. You know what? They're not going to be responsible for that. Maybe they did care. But that's how I saw custody won back in those situations. So you can totally do it. Man, you guys, I'm telling you, you should really go and watch Family Court more, because you can see wins happen in the strangest ways, and you can start to build a playbook of what you need to do. And it's so special. It's so important. But if you go in expecting it to be like anything you saw on TV or hear about or whatever, or you're watching a bunch of us people on YouTube and you just think you got it done, no, you have to learn, right? And there's always a way. And even if you lose, you can get it back. You may not be able to get it back in the way that you want. You may not be able to totally right that wrong and win in the ways you want. But you can get something, and man, you can do it. You can do it. Why is it, I wonder about this. Definitely with moms. Why is it that I've seen more drug addict moms, like heroin addicts, like people that did some really crazy shit, right? Truly put their kids in dangerous positions. Why do I see them get more custody? And let me just tell you, it's not easy because they're a woman. If you are a drug addict mom, you have it hard. You have it super hard, because it's not just that women get more favor or whatever. It's that when a woman is that bad to lose custody of her kids due to drugs, judges will know that something really bad happened. But why is it that there are more drug addict moms that have gotten back some custody from their kids than men's rights activists who refuse to play by the rules? And that's exactly why. The drug addict moms are humble. They go in desperate. They learn the system. They stop fucking around. They stop screaming, and they get into reality a lot quicker. This is not all moms. I wish all moms did this, but men won't do that. And it's there. Man, you guys should definitely watch more Family Court. All right. Hope that was helpful. We're going to get out of here. And if you're watching this on YouTube, there's a video that probably came up that it thinks is a good one. So watch that. All right, guys. Thank you so much. We'll be back tomorrow. And if you're on my 30 and 30, you can always shoot me an email. Don't message me on TikTok or somewhere else or Instagram. Shoot me an email. That is the best way. Bye. 1K viewers, 16 new followers, 1 gifter. Man. YouTube, Zoom. Thank you so much. Guys, I got to go meditate. And it's 3:14. Thank you so much. I'll talk to you guys later.